Hello everyone, BKE here. To get right into it, recently there's been a bit of a blowout about various features added to Black Ops that have annoyed a few players, namely the ability to skip sections of the single-player campaign. Now, while I'm not here to discuss this matter, as it has been explored quite a bit by various YouTubers and other gaming outlets, I am here to discuss an idea that is somewhat related to it, that for the meanwhile I will be calling, for the sake of expedience, multi-channel gaming mechanics. I wanted to explore this idea and present some of the pros and cons, and take a look at how games have already done this and generally have a bit of a think about it. But first things first, what do I mean when I say multi-channel game mechanics? Well, quite simply put, this is when a game provides an option that allows players to experience a game with a completely different set of mechanics, altering the core engagement that either gives a new perspective on the game or better suits the taste of the player. So, for example, if you don't like third-person shooters like Gears of War, the developers could provide an option that significantly weakens the bullets and drives the focus of the game to using melee weapons instead, transforming Gears of War into a spectacle fighter more akin to Bayonetta or Blades of Time. In fact, considering that adaptability is in the very bones of the medium, this kind of thing might not be all too unreasonable. The most common manner in which this kind of option manifests is in turn-based strategy games with a combat mechanic. Usually these games will allow for combat to auto-resolve, allowing the player to focus more on empire or city building rather than the nuances of this combat. And a small change like this can vastly affect the way in which a game is experienced. Of course, allowing a computer to throw clusters of numbers together to figure out which group of numbers are superior is one thing. Changing the genre of a whole game is a completely different story. And so we run into a few hurdles with this idea, namely the cost and time it would take to construct a game so versatile as to allow for such differences in gameplay. To refer to the Gears of War example just now, the developers would have to basically create and balance two whole separate games just to allow for these alternate playstyles, which could indeed negatively affect the whole experience. In fact, the more versatility you allow for, the more problems you run into. Third-person perspectives shifting to first-person perspectives, for example, means that character models and textures have to have significantly more work put into them to allow for the alternate field of view and player-character interaction. We can see this exact problem in modern versions of Dark Souls that allow for a first-person mode. Despite this, we still find games actually managing to accomplish this shift in mechanics, few though they may be. Hiding within the options menu of Mass Effect 3 is a toggle that causes conversations to play out automatically, removing the conversation wheel and many of the associated features, turning the conversations into something more akin to cutscenes. You were even given the option to change the core engagement of Mass Effect 3 at the start menu, allowing you to choose between a more action, role-playing or story-driven experience. The overall effect of this feature resulted in the focus of the game shifting from a combat-heavy RPG into a third-person shooter with RPG elements, or simply a cool story in which you got to have a few climactic battles. This simple and literal gestalt switch shows just how easy this concept can be executed upon, and also reveals something about the essential nature of RPGs, namely that they allow for freedom of choice in dialogue. Admittedly, Mass Effect 3 was criticized for being too combat-focused as it is, discarding many of the RPG elements of the previous installments in favor of a more streamlined combat experience, and this does poke holes in ME3's potential as an example for this concept, as it would appear that the game was primed to go in this combat-focused direction anyway. Nevertheless, since this idea isn't very often explored and since so few examples exist, Mass Effect 3 does serve to show how simple these changes can be to completely alter the experience of a game. On the plus side of the financial aspect, we have begun to see that more and more often gamers will confine themselves to a certain genre, not wanting to experiment with different mechanics or different types of narratives. We most commonly see this expressed in the stereotypical shooter player, who is so invested in the multiplayer aspect of that genre that they never get to experience all that gaming has to offer. Indeed, this is possibly one of the reasons Infinity Ward executive producer Mark Rubin feels that Call of Duty players aren't hardcore gamers. The genre entrenchment also has the added effect of limiting the potential market for games, which, combined with the ever-increasing costs of AAA development, can prove quite damaging to the industry. As a consequence of this cost issue, publishers responded in the only way they knew how, which was to increase the mass appeal of their games by making them as generic as possible, so as to give them the most ubiquitous appeal. This reaction of publishers was perhaps rather ill-considered, as it proved the death of certain franchises, such as Dead Space, who ultimately lost their identity and player support brought along with it. And this is where multi-channel game mechanics might find a solution, by allowing players to customize their experience based on their own desires. An RPG might become a shooter with the flick of a switch in the options menu, allowing the game to cater to people who might enjoy only one of those genres, while also tempting them to experiment with the alternate playstyle on offer. Provided developers can justify the effort to employ this option more frequently, I definitely think we should encourage them to do so. Ultimately, options to tweak the appeal of games in minor ways should be considered more often. Lord knows we all dread our favorite franchise getting ditched by its publisher because it didn't sell well enough, or the publisher completely changing the direction of our beloved franchise to increase profits. Through implementation of this idea, we might see these issues mitigated to some degree, allowing us and others to continue to enjoy the medium we love for the reasons we love it. And, well, that's that. I hope you enjoyed this little diversion. Let me know what you think in the comments, because I really do like exploring these ideas that are new to me, and I'd really want to see what you guys think about it. See you next time.